Well, good morning. Welcome to North Point. We're really glad you're joining us online today. I've been feeling really nostalgic this week. The flower girl that was in our wedding 11 years ago, Avery Parker, graduated from high school this week, which seems so just unreal. My daughter finished the second grade, and when I think back on everything that she's gone through this year, it's truly amazing what she has accomplished. Also today, I'm dragging my family to a reunion of North Point Youth Group girls from 20 years ago. I'm so excited to see these girls. We've developed lifelong friendships, and I'm just super excited to catch up with them. But I've been thinking about all of the things that have happened through these years in my life, and some of them have certainly been joyful, but others have been hard and sometimes tragic or devastating or confusing. So many things have happened through your years, through this year. But the Lord is faithful, and he says to us from Isaiah 41:10, "So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous hand." Zephaniah 3:17 says, "The Lord your God is with you, the mighty warrior who saves. He will take great delight in you. In his love he will no longer rebuke you, but will rejoice over you with singing." Psalm 34:19, "The righteous person may have many troubles, but the Lord delivers him from them all." Genesis 28:15, way back at the very beginning of the story between God and his people, God says to Jacob, "I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go. I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you." And my very favorite verse in the whole Bible, Isaiah 35:3, "Strengthen the feeble hands. Steady the knees that give way. Say to those with fearful hearts, be strong. Do not fear. Your God will come. He will come with vengeance, with divine retribution. He will come to save you." Yes, the Lord is with you. He is faithful and never failing. For all of the things that you have faced, he has upheld you. For all of the things that you will face, he will strengthen you. Let's pray and worship together.
Well, it's good to be here again with you. I want to give you a quick reminder that, and this is especially true for any of you that are new and joining us for the first time, we are a church and an online community that takes the Lord's Supper together when we gather on our Sunday morning. No matter where you are or what day of the week it is for you, we would encourage you to go and get some juice and get some bread of whatever you happen to have on hand. Bring it and have it ready, because in a few minutes at the end of the message we're going to share some communion together, and I'll give you some a little bit of lead up for that. Also, and I've been thinking a lot about this this week. Monday, May 31st is the day as a country we set aside to honor and to mourn those who have lost their lives in military service to our country. Every year at this time, there is no doubt I see this obvious connection between this memorial of Memorial Day and the memorials we read about in the Bible. I just do. In Genesis chapter 12, we begin reading the story of Abraham, who at this point in his story in the Bible is called Abram. He gets his name changed a little later on. He is the great patriarch of our faith. And God told Abram to leave his home, leave his people, leave his household, leave everything that he had acquired, leave everything that he had come to know as sacred about his life, and to set out for Canaan. And God made these huge promises to him that he would be the father of a great nation and that the entire world would be blessed because of him. All people would be blessed, not just those that were of his lineage, but everybody. And as they traveled, this small group, just he and his wife and his nephew and their servants and animals and so forth, a fairly small group, as they traveled through the land on their way to Canaan, one of the things that they did is they set up altars. They built altars, these monuments of God's goodness and God's provision to them. And it was around those altars that they worshiped God publicly. And honestly, they were well on their way to living happily ever after, following God and living within his promises. But then as we read through the story in Genesis, things began to go south, like rapidly. There was a famine in the land, and life became much more difficult for them to live than he expected. I think it's just sort of a caricature of our lives. Just when we think things are starting to go well, something happens and life becomes much more difficult. And instead of trusting God and seeking his guidance, Abram chose a new road and a new destination. For him, it was Egypt, but I find that to be largely symbolic for us as we read hundreds and even thousands of years later. Abram proceeded to do everything wrong. He acted directly opposite of God's plan, just like we have this tendency to do. Because of his decisions and his leadership in abandoning God's provision, he more than threatened his future family. He brought dishonor to himself. His name was not given the worth and the value as God had told him that it would be. but it was given dishonor because of his deception and his disobedience. Look, you can read all about this story in chapter 12 and 13 of the book of Genesis, but let's just say, instead of becoming a blessing to all people, he brought plagues and curses on the house of Pharaoh. Everything was exactly opposite of what the Lord had promised him. But God, as he always does, says, I'm going to make the story right again if you'll just obey me. We read in chapter 13 parts of verse 1 and parts of verse 3. We read these words. So Abraham went up from Egypt to the Negev with his wife and everything he had, to the place between Bethel and Ai, where his tent had been earlier, and where he had first built an altar. There Abram called on the name of the Lord. What God did in order to restore Abram is he led him back to the altars that he had built. He led him back to the memorials where they could remember and be reminded of the earlier promises that God had made to them. These earlier moments in their life together. And I believe this story is in the Bible really primarily to help us understand that we are all called to go back to God, to let go of what is safe and let go of what is predictable and trust God at his word and to follow him where he is leading us. We are all to leave Ur and go back to Canaan. I'll tell you this, Wanda and I have done this a few times in our lives. And I don't want to make it out to be that we were some kind of Abram and Sarah wandering around in the wilderness, although that first trip to Texas, it sure felt like wilderness like we had never seen before. 26 years ago, we left family and friends and connections and safety and comfort and everything we knew. And we left behind almost everything that we owned. We kind of piled some things into our truck and our camper and threw a few things in the back of a moving van that was full of somebody else's belongings, but they gave us a little spot in the back to put a few of our larger things. And we set out for Texas. It was the land of wilderness to us. We didn't know anything at all about what was going to happen here. Seemed so foreign. And I can tell you that as I look back over the years that we have spent here, they have not always been easy years. So much of it was unknown and unpredictable and things that we didn't expect, that we had to adjust to, that we had to declare and affirm and reaffirm our trust in God in order to live out our lives here. And I'll tell you this, far too often in my own life, and I'm ashamed to admit this, but far too often I have trusted myself and ended up trying to tell God what was best for my life, only to be brought back to the reality of a life of faith with God. But one of the things that I learned at a really, really early age was to build altars. Now, they weren't the kind, I suppose, that Abram built. They were the kind that I had. Actually, my personal life is full of them, full of memorials and altars and memories. If you look behind me on both sides, and if you were to look carefully in detail, there are so many little things that are up there. whether they are books or knickknacks or memories or words or posters or pictures or whatever. They're all altars that remind me that God is faithful and that He knows best. I actually brought in 3 of them, 2 that I have at home and 1 that I have here. My wedding ring. It's a little hard for me to wear it anymore. It's a little bit too small. Maybe another thing that this is a reminder of is that I need to lose some weight. So there you go. I've confessed it. But this is an altar. This is a memorial. This is a reminder of commitments that I made over 45 years ago to live out my life with Wanda and she with me, and trusting that God would honor that promise that we made to each other when we were just young kids. I was a punk. Wanda was awesome. But we trusted God and we have followed Him together. And this is a reminder of that. This rock that I have that is usually up here on my bookcase comes from a wilderness trip years ago that I went on. And part of the trip was to go out and spend a day or 2 alone in the wilderness and make some promises to God there. And I brought this rock back with me as a memorial, a reminder of those promises that I made to God and that I knew that He made to me if I were to live out my life of obedience to Him. And all I've got to do is look at that rock and I remember those promises that were exchanged out there on top of a mountain so many years ago. And this one right here, I mean, look, so many books that I have become altars and memorials for me. This is one of them. It's all kind of torn up and so forth. It says What Kids Need Most in a Dad by Tim Hansel. And yeah, it's a book about parenting. There's no doubt about being a dad in particular. I got this book in 1984. It was 2 years after our first son was born, and I was swimming in not knowing what to do, still scared of having the responsibility of raising a child. And Tim Hansel was a friend of mine, and I knew that he had written this book, and so I bought it. And I'll tell you, I have read this book through so many times, and there are lessons in the book that have, he wrote them to be about parenting, but they ended up being about so much more. And I can go back to that book any day, any time, no matter what I'm going through, and kind of read through it. And those are words that I feel like Tim wrote to me to help me along the way, to make sure that I was living up to the oaths that I made to God and the promises that I made to Wanda and to our sons of the kind of man that I would be and the kind of parent that I would be to them. And man, I got to tell you, that book means so much to me. And it's just as much about the words as it is symbolically about the book itself and how meaningful it is to me. I need to be reminded of earlier promises that I've made, earlier moments, and so do you. Because it's at these altars that we have where our hearts get realigned and we get pulled back into order. Altars and memorials are where we get this opportunity to retrace our steps and come to grips with the reality of what we are doing and who we are becoming. No matter if it's good or bad, we are brought back to that reality, and the altars are where we go to get out of our mess and get our life set straight. because altars are where the power and the presence of God was most evident in our past life. And it's where we get to remember in the present that God is the same today as He will be tomorrow, as He will be forever, and His promises can sustain us every day. So as we come to the Lord's Supper today, this one is so simple today to make the connection. It's important to recognize that Abram did not become this amazing, towering man of faith overnight. Not even close. And this moment that we have with the bread and with the juice of communion, this is a memorial. This is an altar. It's a regular, tangible reminder that it is not our goodness or our strength or our faith that sustains us in the day-to-day. Rather, it is the power and the presence of the risen Christ that gives us life. Come to the altar with me today, again.
Acquainted with sorrow, may Christ in our marrow carry us home from alabaster. Come blessings of laughter, a fragrance of passion, joy from the truth. Grant the unbroken, tears ever flowing from hearts of contrition, only for you. May sin never hold true, that love never broke through, for God's mercy holds us, and we are His own. This road that we travel, may it be the straight and narrow. God, give us peace and grace from you. All the day, shelter with fire, our voices we
So as those who inherit the promises of Abram, we shouldn't be surprised when his mess is the same for all of us as well. We all fail. We all get lost. We all lose our way. And we all think we know what's best for our lives and reject God's love and guidance from time to time. So how about you go back? Go back. Find some of your altars. Find some of them, those road marks, those stacks of 3 stones, those books, those reminders that you have in your life of God's goodness and of His provision. Go back to where you once walked well with God. And I promise He'll meet you there. Until next time, see ya.
I was buried beneath my shame. Who could care?